in this. And I was not around at that time, so I'm no authority on the subject. So Faye Bradwick will share with some pictures put together by Don Lancaster.
Hi, I'm Faye Bradwick, and I've been a member of this congregation since 1991, but this congregation has been not here on this property, but in this town since 1958, so that's 65 plus years. And my husband, Don Lancaster, is historian for this group. He's not been here as long as I have because he joined us in 2002, but he had access to some photos and a bunch of other material. And so over this past week, he and I put this slideshow together. He did the bulk of it, but I filled in the names. And he even, looked up a bunch of stuff online to get the dates right. So 30 years ago, almost exactly to the day, it was April 3, 1994, was our first service in this building. And we purposely did it on Easter Sunday because that was a time that this congregation generally would gather and do some special things on Easter Sunday. We always would have a pancake dinner but a pancake breakfast. But before we had the building, we were over to the Chevy Chase Center, and you'll see a couple pictures on there. So Eric, if you will help me and advance. Okay, so this is a picture of, we bought the 4 acres just before I got here. I got here in July of 91, joined the church in September of 91. And it was sometime that spring or summer, they finalized the purchase of the 4 acres of land. Now, if Sara Steelman was here today, she could tell us more about that, or George Bieger, but they're not here. I think they're probably traveling. Okay, so you want to give me the next one? There's another picture, and this is, you'll see most of the same houses are still across the street. In fact, some of them you can see right from the window here. Give me the next one, Eric, thanks. And then we started to develop the land because remember when we got the land, it was a chunk of 4 acres of land. There was no driveway. There was no way for us to get in or anything. We had no building at that point. The building came 3 years later in 94. Okay, Eric. Okay, now here we have, these are 3 people who were very instrumental in the church back 30 plus years ago. And that is that Lee Schweitzer, Don? Okay, Lee Schweitzer, and then leaning over is Denny Rom. If you want to see Denny nowadays, you go up to Luigi's in Clymer and you'll find him working the bar up there. And Bob Litteral, the husband of Susan Litteral, who created this beautiful stained glass window. So they were erecting our first sign, and you'll see it says, future site of First Unitarian Universalist Church of Indiana. And there's Lee Schweitzer and Denny Rom and Bob Litteral working on the sign. So that sign went up in 91 to announce to the world that we were here and building. Okay, next one. Okay, now, we go forward a couple of years from 91 to 93. April 11 of 93 was the last Easter service and pancake breakfast that we had at the Chevy Chase Center. And we rented over there, I'm thinking it was about 15 years or so over there. Prior to that, the church met in other places, other rentals, but Chevy Chase was the place that I knew when I arrived and was used to having services over there. Okay, now some of the kids here, and the kids that are there, the one on the left was our minister at the time was Chancey Rawley, who also was a sociology professor. And the little girl on the left was his daughter. The little boy on the right, Colin, the little girl was Sierra, the little boy on the right was Colin. And those were 2 of his 3 kids. But it's kind of dark, but if you can see the adult woman in the back, that's Tina Purdue. Tina, you're here. Can you see that? And then the taller of the little girls, sort of in the middle there, that's Kaylin Chanwick, and her parents were Philip Chikansky Rivers and Ann Blatherwick, and they were also very active in the church back then. Both have since passed. Okay, some more pictures from the pancake breakfast Easter Sunday. And Mark, do you recognize who this is on the right-hand side? That would be Mark's sister, Doris George, who was our director of religious education back then, along with Karen Bieger, who's married to George Bieger. So, and Jeff Bieger is one of the Bieger kids who was in there helping prepare. In this picture here, if you see the woman standing in the back with the red dress, that's Timmi Jones, who was an incredibly active member of this congregation until her passing in 2010. I'm pretty sure that's Penny Russell sitting in the blue outfit. Penny was a retired art teacher, and someplace in the building we have a piece of her art that was purchased for this congregation by Jane McGregor, who wanted us to have a piece of Penny's art here. And then Ginger Earley, standing with the long red hair on the right, another local artist. She used to be a florist also, and Ginger was here a long time. What? Penny and Karen Bieger. Oh, that's true. Penny Russell and Karen Bieger did the banners. Penny Russell drew them and Karen Bieger executed them in quilting. Yes, and those banners that hang up here were made out of leftover sewing materials from various clothes that Karen Bieger made for her family. And if you ever see her, she can tell you which fabric belongs to the childhood pajamas of her boys and so on. So it has great meaning. And I've heard her tell the story over the years. It always makes me laugh a little. Okay. Now, back in those days, this was go forward a few weeks after Easter of '93, and Reverend Carol Brody, who was a UUA field service consultant, basically our sort of regional minister who would come around. She came around and that's when we dedicated the land, was we had an official dedication, okay? And so, yeah, go ahead, Eric, advance it one more. And this was more of that service, which was May 19, 1993. So this would be 31 years ago, leading up to us building the building here. This again would have been over in Chevy Chase. Now, in preparation, the kids and their parents, and I'm pretty sure that's Doris George in the white, and I think that's Kaylin Chanwick in the blue. And I think this is Malcolm Gallinar down in the front with the red shirt on, and Malcolm's ashes are buried out here in our memorial garden. They planted flowers so that we had some permanent vegetation there around the sign. So, and there's some of the kids with the grown-ups helping them to get the plantings in. And then this picture is a really important piece of our history, because this picture actually was posted in the local newspaper, the Indiana Gazette. And so there's, I think that's one of the Raleigh kids in the purple shirt on the edge there, but the grown-ups, that's Reverend Carol Brody, the regional minister, Reverend Chancey Raleigh, who passed in 1998, which was, he died young. He was only in his early 60s. But he was our minister of record here for a long time. And so that was a tough one for this congregation. I was here when he passed. Denny Rom, who was our building committee co-chair when we did the first part of the building in 93, 94. And that is Sara Steelman with the guitar. And at the time, she was a member of the Pennsylvania legislature back then, and was home that weekend, and she was here. And so I remember she would, when we would do dedications of the land, because I've been to a couple of them here, she would strum her guitar and we would sing Woody Guthrie's "Your Land Is My Land." Yeah, that would be Woody the father as opposed to Arlo the son. So, and then there's Carol Brody. I think those must be the site plans, and she's Bob Litteral is offering them to her, and Bob Litteral was the other co-chair of the building committee. So, Okay, and then here's a view, 30 years ago, Easter. So this is where the Easter pictures start here for 30 years ago. And I don't know who snapped these pictures, but that was a picture from, standing up high, looking down on the parking lot. But you'll notice we don't have vegetation at that time. We were still new on the property. And here are different family members. If you can see, they're lugging in their lawn chairs. We had no chairs at this point. We had no carpet. We had no trim around the doors and the windows and the floor. We as members of the congregation prepared all that and assembled it and installed it over the next year or so afterwards. The stained glass window, the Susan Litteral window, which I love this window. I always position myself in the sanctuary here so that I can look at the window. And for those of you who don't know the story of the window, she designed this. Susan was a local artist and stained glass was one of her favorite mediums. She designed this so that it was the flaming chalice for UU, but she also was an environmentalist. Anybody know what this might look like? A whale's tail. Yeah, she did that purposely so that it has sort of a double meaning. So, and there is Susan Litteral, the artist. Now, for many years, we would have both over to Chevy Chase for Easter and here for Easter when we had more people kind of living here and staying here for holidays. Now it seems like many of our people travel for holidays. If you just back it up to the Easter tree there, we would have an Easter tree and someone would go out. A lot of times it was Kay Nowak would go out or Bob Rittle. They'd go out and they'd trim some branches that were on our property that needed to be trimmed anyhow, bring them in and assemble them in a jug, and then the kids would decorate them with Easter decorations that the kids had made over the years. So that was Susan Litteral, probably telling us an Easter story that they don't remember. It's a dark picture, but that is Lori Rittle. And Lori and her husband, Bob, were incredibly active in this congregation until they moved to Tennessee about 10-ish years ago. I'd have to look, give or take a year or two. And what she's doing there, she's actually playing a keyboard, an electric keyboard. We had no piano at the time. This piano was purchased about 10 years. This is the second one, but we had been gifted a piano from a member who married and moved away to Monroeville and gave us her black piano that we had for many years. And it got to the point it couldn't be tuned anymore. So then we, actually, my mother is the one who paid for most of this piano through a gift from her. And, but Lori would play something so that we always had music. And that day it was electric. Okay, so the people from their back. This is Sara Mantel, who was active here and active with music here. She was a voice professor at IUP for many, many years. And Chancey Raleigh, our minister at the time. And I'm pretty sure that's Tina Purdue. And in these pictures, Tina might be able to type a message in. She's homesick today, but she's zooming in. So throughout here, you'll see there's a hairdo parade. Tina and I sort of go back and forth between perms and straight hair. So this decade, I have straight hair. She has a perm. Back then, I had the perm. She had the straight hair. So Tina and I joined about the same time. I came in 91. She came in 92. Susan was leading the service. Again, notice all the folding chairs because for some months, we were in here on folding chairs. Now, we continued to meet over to Chevy Chase for a while, I believe, but not too much longer. We just kind of got used to folding chairs and folding card tables. We still have some of the card tables back in the room there. Okay, now this is Sara Mantel on the right, who frequently would lead a choir for us. And there is Kaylin Chanwick on the left and her mother, Ann Blatherwick, in the middle. And they were both very active with the Sunday school kids and all. There's George and Karen Bieger's older son, that's Jeff Bieger. And Mark, who do we have on the right? That is Doris Minser George. That is Mark's sister. And she's what number in the lineup, Mark? She's 3 of 8 and you're 5. Okay. So, so we have had two of the Minser kids as members of this church over the years. And Doris was very active back then. There we are with some of the folding card tables and folding chairs and you can, if you take a look, you can kind of see that the floor is, and I can't, it's concrete. Yeah, it's concrete. And then when we had enough money to buy the carpet, this was attached and it's glued down. And we didn't get all the trim and everything in. We had to stain it. We had to measure and cut it. And we had to install it, and we couldn't do that until after the carpet was put in. So, and Sara Mantel's husband, Vaughn, who was an art professor, he actually supervised a lot of that because he was very particular about the color stain that we put on. He wanted to put, you know, the art touch on it to make sure it all matched up well. So yeah.
Some of the people like Paul Bauer were engineers, and we have people in the community, in the church community, that were very much into the trades.
Yes. Yes, back in those days, we had a lot of people who had a lot of hands-on craftsman type abilities. The man sitting to the right is Paul Bauer. He was married to Martha Bauer, who's the woman in the white next to him. Marty was an English professor at IUP. Paul was an engineer, and they actually were from New Hampshire. So they lived a split life. You know, they lived part of the time here. In fact, they just lived across the street up the hill a couple of blocks. And they also had a home in New Hampshire. And when she retired altogether, they went back to New Hampshire. Paul has since passed, but they were wonderful people. But because he was an engineer, he helped us design this room. And there was another engineer amongst our membership then, and that was Ken Adelot. And between Ken and Adelot and Paul Bauer, we ended up with this room because the design that the architect had for us originally was going to cost us 2.5 times price-wise what we were prepared for. We were given a bill of estimate of between like 600 and 750,000, and we were only expecting like 250,000. And so we had to cut off half the building. So we needed to make this room, the sanctuary, be multi-purpose. And they came up with the, is it an octagon or a hexagon? I always have to count. I think it's an octagon. They came up with the octagon design to give us that multi-purpose ability in this room. And there is little Alex Bieger, who was sort of, he was sort of everybody's little mascot at church, because at the time he was the youngest kid. When I got here, he was probably about 2 or 3. And his parents are Karen and George Bieger. So there's little Alex at the pancake breakfast. And George Bieger used to be the one who would head up the making of the pancakes for the pancake breakfast. Now, that year, first time we were in this sanctuary in '94, we didn't have a kitchen or anything at the time. It wasn't completed yet. We still had to figure out how to afford cabinets and so on. It wasn't even in the same location where it is now, because of course, that whole edition of the building was put on in 2017, and this is 1994. So there's one of the Raleigh boys. I think that's Colin, the younger one. And then on the right is Eric Earley. His mother, Ginger Earley, was and there. I couldn't tell this when we were putting this together. They're counting money. They were taking money for the pancake breakfast.
They have hot plates set up here.
Yeah, there were hot plates. George had hot plates. Everybody loaned, hot plates and stuff. And George had a team of people assembled, and they were, making the pancakes. So we had a cake that said, "Congratulations, we did it. We got the building built and we got in here." So when we started, this building was this room out here where the coats and the foyer are. That was the kitchen at that time. And there was nothing going back this way. And then if you went down the hall, the minister's office was there. The minister's office was on the left, sharing it with whoever was helping in the office as an office administrator. And we had 3 Sunday school classrooms down the hall at that time. Okay, now here, this is just a little bit later, a couple months later, June of '94. We had a celebration here, an ice cream social. And this was Philip Chikansky Rivers and Paul McGregor, married to Jane McGregor. They were making the ice cream in, one of those old fashioned ice makers with the rock salt and all that kind of stuff. And we did that one day. Okay, now in this picture, I think this was probably the ice cream social. If you go on the left, Gordon Thornton, who is still actually a member of this congregation, but he lives out in the state of Washington now with one or two of his adult children who are out there. So Gordon on the left, moving right, Susan Litteral, Gordon was a psychology professor at IUP, Susan Litteral, local artist, Sally Thornton, Gordon's wife. Sally was a Spanish professor, and Sally died very suddenly here a few years ago. I still miss her. That's me with permed hair in the blue shirt. And next to me was my neighbor kid, Miranda Welsh. A lot of you know Sue Welsh in town. That's Sue Welsh's older daughter, Miranda. She was probably about 12 or 13 at the time. The tall woman in the white shirt is Kathy, married to Mark, and I cannot remember their last name. And they lived across the street in the A-frame house that's right directly across the street. Can anybody remember their last name? Kathy and Mark. It'll probably come to me in the middle of the night, but it didn't come to me last night. I tried working on it. Okay. And I don't know who the kid is with the dark hair there with the bag. Okay. Next. And here's straight hair Tina. Okay. And June of '94. And at this point, Tina had been with us 2 years. She'd been here 2 years. I'd been here 3 years. Okay. Next one. And also a June '94 picture, although I think it might be a somewhat different day because I got a different shirt on. Okay. All right. So Ginger Earley is on the far left, kind of falling off the screen, and I'm next to her. Timmi Jones, longtime member here. And if you remember, we used to have an organ that sat over on the side of the church for a long, long time. That was a donation from Timmi. It was an organ her family had at the Methodist church when they had been there in her childhood. So Timmi Jones, and then Susan Litteral, and Sandy. I know her last name starts with an H. I cannot remember the last name. She was the wife of John with an H. He was the dean at IUP in the music department, and I don't have any music department people here today. So anybody remember the name? I'll have to get Matt Balmer should know. Okay, and then there are the Thorntons, Gordon and Sally, and in the front, Janet Brayman. Janet Brayman lived to be 100 or 101. Did she make it to 101? Just shy of 101. And Janet was a member of the congregation here for many, many, many years. And she was a violinist, as was her husband. I never knew him. He had already passed. And she would come in her 80s and 90s and would sometimes play one of her violins here for us on Sunday service. And so when she finally decided to stop playing her violins, she donated them to the famous music school up in Cleveland. I think it's the Cleveland Conservatory, but I'm not sure. Someone can correct me on that. And someone from the church here, I believe, either drove her and the violins up, or somebody from the music school up there came down and picked them up. I don't remember, but I remember it was a big deal. And then Lori Rittle and Chauncey Raleigh and Elizabeth Amonasir in the back. Elizabeth, also known as Elizabeth Grosh, when she came here, and she eventually changed her name. We had several people in the congregation who would decide they wanted to make up their own names, and she was one. And Elizabeth was very active in this congregation. She was, Nana, she was the lay leader, the licensed lay leader that we had in this congregation.
She did weddings.
And she could officiate and so on, yes. And as she got older, her kids wanted her to move into Pittsburgh where they were, but she maintained a close friendship with Reverend Joan Sabatino for many years after that, and she passed about 10 years ago. And I don't know who the woman is in the blue outfit. She may have been a guest of somebody. I don't know. I do not recognize her. And the man in the back, that is Bob Rittle, husband of Lori Rittle. Lori is also standing in the back there. And right falling off the screen in the white shirt with the earrings and the silver hair, that is Jane McGregor. Okay, do the next one. You could-
That's not a young Ilse Hilliard.
No. Oh, you know what? It could be. You might have it.
See the
Yes. I knew it was somebody Asian, but yes, I bet you're right. I bet that's it. I bet that's Ilse Hilliard. Yeah, we can fix that. Yeah, because she was an active member back then. That makes sense. Thank you.
It's the same day. different
Yeah,
day.
and here, yeah, I think you're right. Yeah. Okay, I think you're right. Ilse Hilliard lives down in Homer City. Okay, so June of '94 again, Bob Litteral, Ginger Earley, Timmi Jones, Susan Litteral, you gotta spell her to check there, Don.
Yeah.
Me, Janet Brayman in the yellow dress in the front, Sandy H, I can't remember the last name again, Sally, Bill Kale, this was actually a going away party for Bill Kale and his wife BJ Kale, the woman in the center with the yellow dress. He was a dean at IUP, I think, science and math dean, and she was a reading teacher, and they were getting ready to take another job. They moved down to Texas where they had kids that lived. And so this was a going away party for the Kales. Lori Rittle is back there with them. Sally Thornton is back there with them. Chancey Raleigh, our minister of the time. Gordon Thornton, Elizabeth Amonasir, and I think you're right, Eric. I do believe that's Ilse Hilliard and Jane McGregor, who passed 20 years ago, 21 years ago. The plaque in the hall. Which plaque?
The photo at the end of the.
Oh, yes. There is a photo of Jane McGregor. It's a 3 or 4 generations photo. There's a funny story about Jane. We had a nice young couple. He was with the English department as a student at the time. And his wife was an AmeriCorps or Vista volunteer here at the time. And they were Bill and I can't think of the last names right now. Anyhow, he teaches out in Nevada at the University of Nevada, Reno, I think. Anyways, while they were here and he was a grad student, Jane McGregor kept saying, "We need to grow this church, have some babies." And she'd look at the two of them and she'd say, "You two, you've been married a couple years now, have some babies." So they had one while they were here. So there is a picture specifically done, and it's down the hall someplace to commemorate Jane telling them, go forth and multiply. And they did. And that was baby Zoe Macaulay, Bill, and it'll come to me later, Macaulay, and I still actually talk to them on Facebook. So, yep, Jane McGregor was responsible for helping to populate part of this church. So, and that's Jane on the far right. And I think that is the end of the slide. Okay. So, just wanted to give you a little, background and flavor. We actually have a very rich history in this congregation, and a lot of people don't realize that we've been here since 1958, and there's more stories about that. Don has a lot of this. He's going through a lot more because when the Rittles left, they bestowed Don with, I don't know, probably 10 boxes of local UU history, which are taking up space in my dining room right now, but they made it down from the 2nd floor hallway. I got tired of tripping over them. And Don is also on the board now at the local county historical and genealogical society. So he's able to sort of, some of this is going to get fit in over there too. And so he's sort of helping both groups. Do you want to come up and speak? Well, it's easier for the people that are at home on their Zoom.
I've always had a interest.
Just wait till you get up here.
I've always had a deep interest in history, and Reverend Joan, before she left as minister, we talked about all the records. The Rittles were leaving. it was determined I should get a hold of them. So I got records from there, and then when we were starting to have the addition here, they found records stored up in the attic space that we had. And what I'm doing now is digitizing them to archival specifications. And I'll clear this again with the board, but Joan was okay with it at the time. I think the records need to have a permanent home, and if the local historical society won't take them, the Heinz History Center has a UU collection of historical documents for UUs in the Pittsburgh area that was established by the Pitt professor that wrote the history of UU congregations in Western Pennsylvania. It was a book that came out about 10 years ago. So I want them to have a permanent place, but the digital records will be, like right now, this week I scanned contractor plans and blueprints for the development of the grounds here.
So that was
And
from
so-
93.
What will happen is the local historical society and our congregation will have all the digitized records. And
Don also found, just in the last couple days, a complete list of all the ministers
Yeah.
that have ministered to us since nineteen fifty-eight,
inception.
since
And
the
that was when
beginning.
we were trying to get Reverend Priscilla Richter here. We had to list a history of the congregation. So there's some really interesting stuff. Some of us who are older do remember a lot of this and would recognize a lot of the names. But as Faye said, there's a deep history of Unitarian Universalism here with our congregation. And back in the late 1800s, there was a Universalist congregation in Salzburg that was started up after the Civil War. And
The
I've
building
been
is
doing-
still there, yes? or no?
I don't
Not
think
sure.
so, but I
Okay.
know where the building was located.
So,
So-
yeah, because think about it, 1958, when this congregation started, that was before the U and the U
Yeah.
merged. So back then, that was the same year that my family joined Unitarian up in Syracuse, New York. And I remember 1961 when the Unitarians and the Universalists merged together. It was a big deal. I was like 8 years old and didn't quite understand, but I could understand it was a big deal.
One of the neat things a lot of people don't realize, and they didn't realize, is that the Historical Society is that Clarence Stevenson, who was
Yeah.
deemed the county historian, he wrote a 5-volume history of the county, was one of the founding members of our congregation.
Of this
And
congregation.
the first congregation president.
Yeah.
And so we have tremendous amount of
Yeah.
documents and records. And it's all fascinating. And as I go along and I get through this and get through the documents, I will be sharing them with the congregation and talk with the board. We might be able to do some informational, have some get-togethers and do some informational things just to learn about the history.
So we have a rich history. If you want to know more about it, ask Don or ask some of the old timers like me,
Sarah
Tina
Steelman,
Purdue, Sarah Steelman, the Biegers.
Biegers, you got Pauline
And
Sims.
Pauline was sort of in and out. I didn't know Pauline my first years here because you were taking your mom over to the Catholic Church
Yeah.
then. So she was here for many years, gone for years and then back. So, and we're very glad you're here. So anyways, we'll turn it back over to
Thanks.
Nana to do the end here. Thank you. Happy Easter to you all.
Thank you, Faye and Don. Now I invite you to join me in saying our words together to extinguish the chalice flame. We extinguish our chalice flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. We leave this gathered community, but we don't leave our connection, our concern, our care for each other. Our service to each other, to the world, and to our faith continues. Until we are together again, friends, be strong, be well, be true, be loving. Blessed be.